welcome back to another edition of the Farmville Spotlight. And today I am joined by a gentleman that shares my first name, Noah Layman. And Noah, why don't you introduce yourself for the people who are listening?
As you say, I'm Noah Layman.
Sure.
And I share your first name.
You do share my first name, yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit.
As far as who I am, I'm obviously a local because that's the point of the show. But I also do painting, small carpentry stuff like that.
Sure, yeah.
Also used to do operate a soundboard at a church.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think that's what we're going to be talking about in a little bit. You have how many years did you help out operating in sound and helping set up and miking equipment?
As far as when I started helping out, I probably started when I was 17 and it ended around 21, so about 4 years of helping.
Yeah.
I didn't really start to operate the soundboard till early or mid 18, so that'd be closer to 3 to 3.5 years.
Did that feel like a short amount of time, like training before you started running the board? Like, that's a year?
Yeah. Well, not even a year because
Less than a year.
It was the ending of 17. I waited a month to be able to move up in class, in the church class, before I started to show up regularly on Wednesday. And so I had 7 months to learn how to operate a soundboard. Yeah. And I'd say it's good enough for a church, obviously.
That's what you want to hear from your sound guy. It's good enough. No, I'm kidding. It's just good enough, and that's it.
Good enough so that when the actual sound operator, who was my brother, when he left for short jaunt, the worship leader who knew a little bit could actually come up and give me direction. Yeah. And people could give input, and I would know how to respond for the most part. There's some things I remember doing worship practice on a Thursday night. I'd have a couple of people asking to like turn the gain up or just to give a delay and an echo. Yeah. And I didn't understand what they were asking for because I thought I was turning it all the way up. And then, anyways, and I could see the worship leader didn't want to say anything to the person who's asking because he's anticipating the sound operator to know how to operate the sound.
Of course. With your sound operator, you want them to be able to operate sound. Like, that's one of the basic needs.
And by sound operator, that's kind of a stupid thing to say.
Sure.
Soundboard operator.
Sound operator. You're not operating like sound waves in the air. Yeah.
So I'm very much not in like formal training of this.
Sure. But you do have the experience, the 4 years of, 3 years of operating. And
I have the sweet taste of failure and success on an amateur level.
That's beautiful.
Within a church with, let's say, 100-plus eyeballs watching me fail or succeed.
Well, I want to ask you, so you kind of brought up one of my points that I wanted to bring up today, and that was working with a team. Like, obviously the soundboard guy, needs to work with the musicians or the speaker or what have you. So how is that relationship, like in your experience, like from when you did this? Like,
so how was it in how I liked it or how I perceived it?
And how you, not only how you perceived it, but like how you handled like dealing with like a guy being like, hey, I need more gain on this mic. Like, I don't know. Would you get like stressed or would you get like just a little
initially, because like I say, some people would ask for funny things, or at least what I thought was funny, or some people would be asking for their vocals and their floor monitors to be turned up, not in ears, but like floor monitors, and I would turn it up, and because I'm an amateur and don't have like a system of operation of when to turn how to turn everything on, and then how to turn everything off at the same. That I would forget a floor monitor. And I would even do this in the second year because, again, I'm not professionally trained. Sure. And
we're not talking about,
we're volunteers.
Sure, yeah.
So I would go through all the hassle on a worship practice on Thursday, preparing for Sunday. Yeah. And then not figure out why it was going bad, and then Sunday morning be fine and realize I just hadn't turned the floor monitor on. Yeah. And you would think it'd be obvious. I mean, I don't want to be rude to anybody, but there's a blue light that shows towards the music, towards the people on stage.
Of course.
And when it's not on, it's not on.
Yeah, exactly.
So it would be frustrating. And sometimes I'd figure it out. I'd walk up to the stage, and I wonder if I just didn't plug something in. Mm-hmm. And but back to your question is, what's it like dealing with worship leader, all the attending musicians, the vocalists, and even a pastor who might have certain tastes that he wants to see.
Exactly.
That's probably past the technical part, probably 60% of the work in the circumstance of working in a church. Yeah. Because you're dealing with a lot of different people.
And in a lot of different needs, I'm sure.
Yeah,
as well.
And wide age variance. You're not at a concert for like 30-year-olds or 20-year-olds or 80-year-olds. I don't know what concert to do that one. Willie Nelson, maybe?
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
But when you're dealing with the worship leaders were great to me. Yeah. Because they knew that I was volunteering. They knew...
You could leave at any point.
Well, and I was really trying my best. Yeah. And obviously, they could probably also sense that I was a little bit...
Stale or stiff?
Stiff, skittish. Yeah. I mean, I'm 18.
Almost like a deer, right? Like.
Well, I'm 18. Yeah, I'm dealing with everybody who's a decade older than me or close to it at a minimum. And they also probably know a little more about the board because they actually installed it.
Of course.
And I'm just there to operate the thing. So I even had one of the main worship leaders. He said I could skip out on Thursday nights, and I figured... I probably need all the practice personally.
Exactly,
myself. Yeah. So, and dealing with the worship leader, they were great. Dealing with some of the musicians, I can't say that any of them were bad because, again, this is a church context. Yeah.
Volunteer for
leaders. I only ever had really butt heads with maybe one or two, and not really butt heads because I would just grit my teeth and be like, okay, I can't help you, or you're gonna have to suck it up because I'm not a sound engineer.
Sure,
I'm just an operator of a soundboard.
Yeah.
And as far as dealing with the pastor, his only things would be like changing procedure Sunday mornings or Wednesday nights, and
maybe moving like a speaker somewhere, like stuff like that,
or even a handheld mic around on the stage in between services, or he would even ask for, like, can we do a little louder this time just to see what the response is so that we might help the younger ones engage in worship or hear him. And, so that's I would say overall the net my experience was good. Yeah. Especially for basically knowing nothing.
Exactly. Yeah, you started off knowing nothing and left, with a pocket full of knowledge, you can say.
Yeah. A bit. I'd say I could at least name 5 things that most people couldn't. So.
Yeah. That's something right there. I did want to ask you...
for 3 years, it better.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you should come out with something. You don't want to... Yeah. When you're mixing, because that's a big part of your job as well, not only making sure the musicians can, hear themselves and their monitors, but you're also mixing the house speaker as well, making sure everything. What are you looking for when you're, obviously standing, you adjusted some settings and then you go into where the main speakers are. What are you listening for to change and to, configure?
So to answer I know this is one question. I'm going to split it into 2 questions. Sure. The first question I'll answer is, what am I looking for between the floor monitors and the main speakers? The thing I'm looking for is I don't want to hear the floor monitors while the main speakers are going. And I don't worry about the main speakers until I've mixed the floor monitors to how the musicians want to hear it on stage. So if they are not happy with, let's say, the main vocal person who's singing the particular song isn't loud enough, they can't follow along. And this would change depending on which song, who's the lead on the stage. So I'd have to basically take notes on which songs would have the lead vocalist where, and make my adjustments mid, service. Yeah. Once I get the floor monitors set up to whatever volume they need relative to each other, then I go to the main speakers and I deal with just basically if it's being overpowered by the floor monitors.
Mm-hmm.
And once that's done with, I go to mixing the... I'm sorry. I'm mixing the main speakers now to fit what I think should be the good mix, or perfect mix, if you will. Yeah. Not that you would ever use the word perfect.
Yeah, and sound, because a lot of things aren't perfect when it comes to sound.
Well, especially when your equipment, by necessity of the church, is limited to a certain quality, and you yourself are limited to a certain quantity of time to devote to this.
Yeah.
You get as close as you can to what you think it should sound from what you have listened to, which is the other thing. Is you have to listen to these songs on your own time from the professionals who you're doing the cover over, so that you know roundabout what musical notes should you hear, or which instrument you should hear the most, which is sometimes the piano, sometimes the guitar, sometimes you'll hear the bass really, really solid through it. Yeah. Or especially like snares. Sometimes those just need to tinkle in the background, and sometimes they need to blast through.
Yeah, it depends on the song, I'm sure.
Definitely. And even the genre within the music.
Yeah. So often when they did a set, like let's say, the band is going to do a set of like 4 songs, would there be times where like one song is like a very bass-heavy song, and then the other one needs to be very piano-heavy? Like, did you have to change that kind of stuff? Like from song to song while they performed?
Oh, definitely.
And how do you manage that? I feel like that's kind of stressful, right? A little bit, maybe?
It was, definitely.
But you get into a rhythm, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, like, speaking to that rhythm, by listening to the music that your worship leaders are trying to get you to help them with, you can help convey it even creatively, so that, like, it might not even sound necessarily exactly like, but because you know the intent of the song, you can sort of follow along with what the worship leader's doing.
Sure.
And also, the worship leader will actually come up sometimes with a sticky note. Towards the end, we got good at coordinating sometimes. Is he'd come up with a sticky note and tell me, this song would like this vocal to be lead, and this instrument to be just a little bit louder.
That's super helpful, I'm sure.
Huge, because sometimes you'd have a song that's heavy piano, and we just came from a heavy guitar song, and I wouldn't have that. I would just have the song, and because I'm not like religiously memorizing each song, I'm just listening to the principle of the song, basically. Yeah. I wouldn't be that dedicated to it. So he'd come up and he'd give some small pointers on each song. Interesting.
Now, I want to ask you, what is your absolute worst nightmare when it comes to sound? Like, absolute, like, this situation might be irreversible, kind of bad. Like, somebody, I don't know, a chord stops working. Like, how do you, do you have a example of something happening like that? Like a story that you could tell us and share with us?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So the worst that I had is actually not a failure of equipment, but the using of the equipment.
Somebody failed using the equipment. Like,
I technically failed because, sound operator is always at fault. Soundboard operator is always at fault. I failed because we had this visitor come in to tell a story. And he's known for this story, and he's been telling it for like over a decade.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you do. It's a Christmas story for him.
Yep.
He's an older gentleman, but he's gone around the nation telling his story. And it's really about him reconciling the loss of his son, I think. And if I'm remembering that correctly.
Yeah.
But I asked him if he knew how to use a microphone that sort of fishes around the ear and hangs beside the mouth. Yeah. The name is eluding me right now.
Like an ear?
It's not an in-ear, but it's a microphone that comes right beside.
Not a lapel, but the other. Yeah, I think people know what you're talking about. The one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is my non-professional.
Yeah. Of course.
Training.
Yeah, no, but you're speaking about your experience, and your history of
my greatest failure, in my opinion. Maybe somebody else might say.
By the way, if somebody doesn't know what that's called, it's they don't know what we're talking about. It's like the business savvy like microphone like people use like while they're on the phone, like they just have it like.
Well, you see it at TED Talks.
Yeah,
you
TED
see it
Talks.
everywhere.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
It's just a wire that comes down to the mouth and it's got a fuzzy end to it.
Mm-hmm. Like a little tiny like fuzzball.
And for whatever reason, that thing's like $90. I don't know why, or it can be higher, but the ones we were getting were like $90. Yeah. And they stretch and they break. Anyways, back to the story.
Yeah. So you put one of these on the guy.
I put one of these on the guy, and I asked him. I said, "Do you know how to use one of these?"
And he said,
"Yeah," because he's gone over the nation. He's visited mega churches and told this story. And so I was like, "Okay, he's got the confidence." But actors always have confidence. Yeah, he's not the actor as in like sleazy. I mean, like.
He was pretending to know how to use this.
No, not pretending. He just thought because he's used them before that he knew how to place it on himself.
Oh, okay.
And I, as a sound operator, should not have trusted him with that.
You should have did it yourself.
Right. And he had a big, bushy beard. And I hope if there's any sound engineer or operator knows exactly where I'm going. The entire time he was talking, it was crackling.
Scruffling.
Because it would hit his beard.
Yeah, and his hair.
Every time he talked. And the whole story is acted out with him narrating.
Yeah.
So the whole thing, except for like a few minutes.
Yeah. That was a disaster that night. I really don't know how you made it out.
So the biggest reason I didn't interrupt him is because I thought at the point when it started, because it didn't happen right away, it like...
Later.
It like leaned into his beard.
So maybe he had it on correctly at first, but somewhere during the show it got...
How do you not fix it knowing full well?
Yeah, exactly.
It's your ear.
Yeah.
Anyways... I shouldn't have trusted him with it. I should have taped it somewhere to his beard or whatever. Yeah. Taped his beard out of the way. I don't know.
Yeah, shaved his beard.
Yeah, and then put a fake one on after the fact.
Exactly.
But I didn't want to stop him because I knew everybody was so engaged. I literally looked over the edge of my wall, our little elevated perch, and I could see everybody was captivated. Had they been disconnected, I would have known immediately to jump down there.
Yeah.
And I had a couple of people walk up and say, "Why don't we change this?"
Yeah.
And they had come from the sanctuary because I was like, if I do this...
Yeah. It's going to ruin everything.
It's going to ruin the story because they could still hear him perfectly clear. It's just every...
Scruffle.
It would just scruffle every once in a while. And it's annoying to the audio people, especially people who are hoping to convey the story perfectly to the audience.
Now, let me ask you, do you wish that he recognized the issue and then kind of called an intermission while that was remedied?
That would have been the idea. Is get a quarter way through, or even a halfway through, and be like, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a slight intermission of like 5-10 minutes.
Sure, yeah.
As we artificially react to that and slowly dim the lights and then turn them back on so he can walk back casually thinking that nobody would ever suspect anything. Yeah. Because nobody would.
Yeah.
They don't know the story.
No.
And then he would walk up to us because we have the door open and say, this is correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Help me right now, please.
Yeah. And also, it would have been ideal in future to have somebody who knows how to use the... really, I should have actually had the pastor at the time wear all black. And we do this sometimes.
Like stagehands almost.
Yeah. Yeah. I know everybody recognizes him, but when you wear all black, people tend to recognize, okay, that's a theater stagehand. That's all,
they don't think it's somebody in the story or the performance.
Right. Yeah. They just see it as like this.
There's something happening, and I'm just
You're just going to ignore this.
Exactly, yeah.
You don't see behind the curtain.
That's so funny, yeah.
There's no man behind the curtain, yeah. So that would have been ideal, is to have that pre-planned with somebody who knew how to operate the microphone.
Yeah.
And wear all black and call an intermission.
Yeah, but that did not happen. And how long was this performance, by the way? Was it a 2-hour? Hour and a half?
I want to say it's like an hour and 15.
Hour and 15.
Because it really wasn't that long.
Yeah.
And I knew that.
Yeah.
And that was the other thing. I was like, if this was like a 2.5 hour thing, definitely.
Yeah.
But I also...
You're okay with writing things out then. You know, you don't rush to get something fixed. You kind of stand back and you're like, well, let's see how this plays out.
Well, previously... Yeah. So this is the other failure.
Sure, okay.
But it's not my fault. This was actual equipment failure.
Okay.
We were doing a wedding.
Oh, boy.
And I was told, for 3 weeks, we would have the weddings and the reception in X place. And I was like, oh, perfect. All I have to do is remove some equipment so it doesn't look like it's a stage. And make sure there's some extra handhelds all over the place just in case somebody wants to make a speech. And obviously have music ready that they gave me, and I had to do all that stuff. And then 3 days before the wedding, I was told, hey, we actually want the wedding ceremony here.
And the reception another place.
Somewhere else.
Yeah.
Let's say Y place. Okay? And I said, at that point, because I was like, this is spur of the moment, and I said, I can do it, but I might have some equipment failure. Because our old equipment that sits in the back never got repaired, and it only sometimes would work. So I should have said, I can't do anything but this bare minimum. Yeah. But they asked for a couple things. I was like, we might be able to do it. It just depends on the... And so the wedding happens, goes without a hitch. Am I relieved? Yeah. The music goes fine. I took this song and I split it up and I looped it. And, and she made it down the aisle just as it came to an end. So for a newbie, that's amazing.
Incredible.
And I'll take any applause, any sound engineers listening. It's like, oh, at least you succeeded at that.
Yeah. I'll clap.
Yeah, thank you. And then the reception didn't quite go smooth.
Nightmare.
Yeah, well...
Total disaster? No, I'm kidding.
Sorry. 2 out of 3 speakers worked.
Yeah. Not good.
Yeah, and 1 out of 2, so 50%, of the handhelds on the separate area worked. So one person got up, did a speech. Sure. That's fine. And then another person tried to get up and play a song and a speech. And we couldn't get the guitar to work, so he just a-cappellaed his speech. So I felt bad about that.
Yeah. That is unfortunate.
And that was the uncle to the bride, too.
Okay.
So I really felt bad for that.
Was this like a close family friend or something? Are you friends with the person still? No, I'm kidding.
Well, I mean, they're in Pennsylvania.
Okay. Now. That sounds terrible.
Yeah. It felt bad, and I tried to tell them. Also, it's a bad idea to change plans 3 days before your wedding. Especially on the sound guy.
I think we should mention that, too.
I had to leave a job midday because they asked while I was working. And at 12 o'clock, because I had rode in with the guys, I had another person come in and take me out.
Yeah.
So.
It takes preparation to throw any sort of, to be a soundboard operator in any situation like this.
You got to find the cables. You got to find...
You got to make sure the cables work.
Yeah, and again, like most sound engineers and sound enthusiasts are thinking, well, duh, you have to find the cables. Again, we're volunteers. We're amateurs.
The cables are like 50 years old. There's
never been professionally trained to tear down and set up, which I think is there's 2 technical words I'm skipping over right now, but I'm drawing a blank.
Sure.
And then procedure of how to store them, how to label them, and all that. Yeah. And I inherited something that didn't have any of that. Yeah. Except for the very basics of how to do what was in one room. So, yeah, it took me half a day to get everything together and moved over to this other place. And and day of, I tested some of this stuff, and it worked. Nah. Yeah. I had the brother of the bride test the equipment with his stuff. And then when the uncle of the bride, who was supposed to do his song and speech, it didn't work. So
equipment is faulty like that.
Well, especially when you know it's faulty.
And like, so like when something like that happens, you can't really do too much to remedy, I guess, stuff like that.
You can take it to sound stores.
Sure. But I mean, like in the situation, like when you're in that moment of like something not working and somebody's trying to say something.
Not unless you have a spare floor monitor or a spare pickup. Yeah. Or even just, I know it sounds very basic to have spare batteries on hand.
So important.
But when you're out at church and people just take batteries and use them for whatever out of the sound room, sometimes you get to a point where somebody's handheld dies. And you're looking for double A's or you're looking for triple A's, And you can't find them because everybody in the church uses
Took them. Yeah.
Yeah, because of the remotes on all the screens everywhere else.
Exactly. Well, this has been really good. We're going to take a quick commercial break, Noah. We're at the bottom of the hour. I do want to mention, though, if anybody has a question for Noah Layman, soundboard expertise. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I don't want to butter you up too much. You can call in 434-394-0924. Noah Layman would be happy to take your call and answer any questions that you have. So just call that number, and we're going to take that break now. We'll be right back after this.
Craving great food and drinks in downtown Farmville? North Street Press Club is the place to be. Enjoy global grub and local vibes, whether you're dining in or relaxing on our patio. Good times are always on tap. Call us at 434-392-9444 for easy pickup or to discuss your catering needs. Let's make your next event delicious.
So good.
Visit North Street Press Club today, where food, drinks, and fun meet.
Once again, the Farmville Spotlight is brought to you by North Street Press Club, your place for great food and drinks. So check them out. Noah Layman, obviously you've had years of experience in operating in these settings of, sound and other things like that. And we did kind of touch on like how the relationship of, these interpersonal relationships with the people that you work with, whether it's a musician or the speaker or what have you, right? There's like different needs of those people, and you have to, manage different ways. What is your favorite part of sound? We've been kind of talking about like the negative things about sound, like it can stop working, it could just start malfunctioning, like stuff like that. But you have joy, you like it too, right? For a reason.
So I'm going to treat that as if it was two questions.
Sure.
Actually.
Okay. You this is the second time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. I like this. Yeah.
I know you didn't ask two questions.
No. I know.
But you had mentioned the negatives. I think if it wasn't problem solving constantly, a lot of people wouldn't be involved in operating a soundboard, because it's the technical of like tinkering around with things, and people are like, ooh.
Yeah.
That I found that once I got through the stresses of figuring out the problems, which is horrible because you got everybody looking at you.
Exactly.
Expecting you to have the answer, and all you can say is, I'm not sure yet.
Mm-hmm.
That's the fun of it once you're done with it, but it's like an adrenaline high. And the second question was, again, sorry.
What's your favorite part?
Oh, the favorite part. The good part.
Yeah, the good part. Yeah. I guess he doesn't have one. No, I'm kidding.
No.
Yeah.
It just takes a second, because as I look back on it, I really am appreciative that I did it.
Yeah.
Because it's not something I looked to do. It was actually, like I had mentioned in the beginning, that my brother had got me into
it was hoisted upon you almost in a way. Right? Like,
I was definitely asked. I was like, look, can you help? Because I need to go, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, sure. Mm-hmm. And my brother waited actually a few months before he asked, because I hadn't really been attending church anyways, so he did right by waiting to see if I was actually there for the church to see. And I was, obviously. I dedicated a lot of time.
Yeah.
But I think the whole thing was good.
Yeah.
I really do appreciate all that time there. I don't know how else to say it, because the negatives are like, oh, and the positives are nothing bad happened. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it probably would have been different had I focused more on trying to relate to people. That sounds so pathetic. But I was actually, like, after the stresses of the board and the stresses of thinking about the board.
You would take a nap.
And the stresses of, like, it's a weekend and I'm stressing.
Yeah.
It's the weekday and I'm working and I'm stressing. Mm-hmm. And then I have to deal with people. And that's, to me personally, a stressful thing anyways. Mm-hmm. Even growing up, because, like, I did theater for a little while. I felt like I was on hot needles the whole time I'd be on stage, and right before I get on stage. So dealing with people is a little,
Yeah.
But I do kind of wish I'd spent a little more time trying to relate to people. Uh-huh. But I would say the whole thing was good. Just like I just like I reflect on the time I had in theater. I do enjoy the fact that I did it, but while I was doing it, it was just difficult. So.
I totally understand that. I think that's a valid point to bring up. I do want to ask you, kind of riding off of that question a little bit. When you're operating the soundboard, right? You're in it. You're making sure everything sounds good, nothing's peaking. You're just you're flowing with it, right? How good is your listening? Are you able to hear what the person speaking is saying, or are you more focused on how it sounds, making sure it's not peaking? Are you able, to follow along with the speaker, or are you more focused on making it sound good? Or can you do both?
You can do some of both when things are slow.
Yeah.
So, how do I say this?
I don't know.
So during the worship practice, I'm focused on the mix.
Yeah.
I don't care about
anything.
I don't care if you're mumbling, so long as it's the volume you want and you're hitting that tune. When it comes to the worship service, now I'm thinking, is everybody actually speaking clearly?
Yeah.
And who is speaking clearly enough to be heard in an articulate way? It's not really supposed to be my concern, but it is my concern because, again, church context and I'm an amateur. So, yes, you can do some of both, but for the most part, you are focusing on, does the speaker have a hum? Do the microphones tick or pop?
Yeah.
Do the instruments work full-time, or are they intermittent connection because their pickup isn't right in their instrument? We had a few instruments just start to have intermittent connections, so I'd have the bass, or I wouldn't have the bass, or I'd have the snare but not the snare.
Sometimes it could be a faulty wire, sometimes a faulty DI box. Could be a number of things. And how do you kind of troubleshoot that? Let's say hypothetically, you're mixing and the bass isn't coming in. What is your mind? What is the first thing you go to to start to diagnose that issue?
Yeah. So actually, what really helped me was towards the end, I would actually have, I wouldn't say a diagnostic schematic of how to just get everything, but I would do the basics of.
You had a template almost.
Yeah, I sort of made a template. Is all right if during, let's say, a practice, I don't really hear the bass. It's intermittent. Is it the board? So I check with plugging in in-ears basically to the board to check if it's the board. If it's not the board, then is it the cable? And I switch cable or plug it into a different outlet to see if it would change anything. Well, if it's not that, then is it the cable? Swap the cable. If it's not the cable, if it's not in the floor plug, if it's not the board, then maybe it's the channel itself it's plugged into the wire that comes in through the snake. So I'd switch channels. If it's not that, then it has to be the instrument hookup.
The internal jack.
Yeah, the pickup of the instrument. Or sometimes we'd have, what do they call it? Direct boxes?
Yeah.
And I would check to see if that's the problem. But that would be basically how I would get down to who's the culprit and then eliminate that culprit. How
long does that take to troubleshoot? And are you holding people up by troubleshooting that?
Sometimes, actually, the artists, during that practices, they wouldn't even know. Because sometimes they're playing along as if they can hear themselves because they got floor monitors. And sometimes because their instruments turned down because we don't want it in that song, but they're still in the background. They can't necessarily hear when they drop out or when they're coming in, but I can hear it through the mains, especially when I plug in to the board with it.
Sure.
And so I would actually diagnose 99% of it without them even knowing. And then I would fix it, and they'd be like, oh, what'd you do that for? And I was like, oh, you were dropping in and out.
Yeah.
And it was just your cable. So.
Yeah.
That was actually the fun part, too, because I was like.
The problem solving.
Here, let me fix this thing you didn't know was broke.
Now,
But, yeah.
I do want to touch a little bit on, and I'll also mention, if you have any questions about sound and any questions for Noah Layman, you can call in 434-394-0924. That's the number to call in. And you can be connected to us on the Farmville Spotlight. But Noah, I did want to mention, how do you deal with feedback? Like, that a terrible sound that sometimes happens when there's two microphones picking up the same sound. And what do you do when that happens?
Kill the mains.
Yeah, kill. So you just stop everything.
So you don't have
mute everything.
So you don't have to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously you have to move the microphones further away.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just, most of our problem with feedback was the musicians or the vocalists would stand within like 1.5 foot of our floor monitors. But then they would have us turn the floor monitors because they like to hear the music, like all artists do. They'd stand there, and then they'd have us turn it to 90 decibels, which goes back to the question you had about what do I do between the floor monitors and the main and the mix, and what am I looking for? Mm-hmm. That also deals with that, because if your floor monitors are too high, it's going to get a feedback loop, and then it's a ring.
Yeah.
And that's terrible. So oftentimes it's just turn your floor monitors down, turn your mains down, put a higher threshold, I believe, on, so that for each microphone or whatever, from the board, so that whatever bleed through you get will be shunted. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Interesting.
It's just
mutes though.
Well, the worst part is when you have somebody who's quiet.
Yeah.
And then
you have to raise it up.
Well, you have to turn the volume up, but even that's not enough. Sometimes you have to turn sensitivity up. Mm-hmm. So, and that leads to feedback because the higher frequency sometimes just rings through. Anyways.
Do you often feel like people listen to you when you give them advice of, like, let's say there is a quiet person. When you say, hey, you got to speak up because, your voice is really quiet and it's not coming through much. Do you often have to kind of make those kind of comments to people? And also, do people listen to the soundboard operator when he's making requests like that? And you can be honest.
So, again, this is a church context.
Okay, because you did do sound at a church.
Yeah.
Just to clarify.
And I'm pretty sure I mentioned this pretty much throughout this whole thing.
Yeah.
It's worship, so you don't get worship at a non, Mm-hmm. I'm clearly, I don't look Muslim.
Yeah.
Anyways, yes and no. Yes, people do listen if they know that you've been running the sound.
Yeah.
No, if they don't really know. Like if you ask, sometimes let's say the pastor will ask a school teacher in the church, or somebody who's not used to being on stage to come up. You don't really correct them because they're only up there once. Mm-hmm. And the time they're up there, oftentimes the pastor knows by experience with dealing with a microphone that they can,
correct that.
Correct a little bit. Don't hold the microphone so far away as I bump your microphone.
Yeah, that's funny.
Don't tilt it too far away from you because it's directional. Try to speak up, or if he hears it ring, he knows to move them away from the speaker. Sometimes they'd be off on the side of the stage.
Right next to the speaker. Yeah.
And it just, the low frequency from the backside actually will ring. So he'll move them away.
Yeah.
And sometimes he'll have to turn his own microphone off because he's got his microphone on. And they're talking right beside him, and so it's looping. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What is your, kind of going off on another question here, but what is your experience with hooking up acoustic instruments, like instruments that cannot be connected via jack, but you have to put one microphone in front of it, one by the side, I'm thinking of an acoustic drum set, or maybe a cajon or something on the line of that, maybe a violin that doesn't have a jack. What is your protocol for that?
So we only had to do that probably 20 times while I was there for 3.5 years. 20
sounds like a lot, though.
It really isn't, because you're there 3 times a week.
Yeah.
every week, 52 weeks.
That's a lot of weeks. Wow.
3.5 years. So, and then plus events.
Yeah.
And the wedding. Like the wedding.
Sure, yeah.
You would know.
Yeah.
So we did it maybe 20 times. Maybe not even that. We typically put them further away from the monitor so that their phantom mic doesn't pick it up. We would typically have to turn it up a little bit because acoustic into a microphone, into the board, comes in just a few decibels lower anyways. It pretty much went smoothly. We only had I think we had 6 or 4 channels that had phantom power on the board. We would only ever have to use 2 out of them. And the only problem was the 4 or 6 channels that were phantom would often be where we'd have the bass or the electric guitar. So we'd have to move everything around. And so now I have to temporarily relabel the board. And we did it in the worst way. Every sound engineer, every soundboard operator knows you shouldn't use tape.
No.
But when you're in a church and you're a volunteer and an amateur with no formal training, that's what we did.
You taped the board.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be admitting to this kind of stuff.
Well,
No, I'm kidding.
This is so that everybody who calls in knows ahead of time. I'm not the pro.
No, of course not.
I just know a few things.
Well, I think people understand that. You know, I'm not saying I joked about expertise.
I know.
Lighthearted joking, but I do think you have valuable experience, and you've done it for a long. You know, you've done sound for 4 years. That's enough to be able to speak on the matter. I think, and so I don't think anybody's writing notes down at home. But I think it's just interesting for you to talk about your experience doing sound.
Yeah, for me it was magical because it was 2 years into doing it. 2.5 years into doing it, and then somebody said, "Oh, we have phantom power." And I looked at the other guy who said that, and I was like, "What is phantom power?"
Let's speak about phantom power. Let's get into it. Would you like to explain to the people who don't know what phantom power is?
Yeah, this is obviously not for the sound engineers.
Yeah.
They know.
Yeah, of course.
Obviously. So it's where you have channels on your mixer board that can send power to a passive microphone that picks up an acoustic instrument that has no port or jack to plug into, no 1/4-inch phone jack. So you would hook this up somehow. It'd be typically it's specialized to the instrument because a violin is different from a bass, is different from a acoustic guitar. They typically clip on a little bit different, but they're all essentially the same. They clip to the holes of the diaphragm of the instrument, and that's typically closest to where the sound emanates, and then it gets plugged into, how do I remember this? It gets plugged into a little, not a transmitter, but some little box, and then that gets plugged into the floor. And only where that floor jack is actually hooked on the snake to the mixer board where it's powered. So, yeah. And you just hit the power button.
Okay. So, yeah.
You also don't want to hook anything that's not needing phantom power to it.
Is it yeah, it's important to mention. Is there a advantage, is there certain moments when you are I want to use phantom power versus just a regular, input?
Oh, and I should correct myself. Yeah. It's not just when you're doing instruments that need a hookup. Yeah. Sometimes microphones are passive, so they need to be powered. I say passive. They don't have any internal or external power source that is built into it to except through the microphone plug or cord. So if you have a microphone that doesn't say have batteries in it or another source of external power, which you can do, you would hook the microphone to the phantom power and power it that way. It also streamlines the floor plan, I think, a little bit because you don't have to have any external power. You also don't have to worry about batteries dying on you, which if I had known that a couple of years ahead of time, I probably eventually would have
switched.
phased out our handhelds that relied on battery. Every other Sunday we replaced batteries.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we'd forget, or sometimes they'd actually use it for too long.
Mm-hmm.
And it would die mid.
Or leave it on and forget to shut it off.
Exactly. And it would die. And then, or somebody, we'd have so many people on stage that we'd use them for a vocal.
Yeah.
And then I'd switch the EQ on it to allow somebody to speak through it. So the vocalist would give it to the person who needs to speak, who's not the pastor. So that would have been handy to know.
Yeah, definitely.
And phase out our battery handhelds.
I want to ask you about choir microphones. Now, I don't know.
Overheads?
Overheads, yeah. I say choir because, like, overheads are mostly used for choirs, I want to say.
Yeah. In a church setting, anyways.
Definitely in a church setting, yeah. What's the deal with those? What's the sensitivity like? When do you like to use those overheads?
So, again, the church setting, you're typically doing it for Christmas things or special events when you have, like, you invite, like, a band.
Or a guy to tell a story.
Well, we didn't use it for that.
Yeah, I know. Would that have been a good time to use the overhead mic, do you think? Or is it more for when there's multiple people on stage?
It's for that, so that you get the sense of a crowd type audio and not like a specific person. The narration of the story needed to be pretty well authoritative in its sense of power. The overheads are good for choirs because you don't really want to hear any individual choir member.
Sure.
And you want to hear all of them.
Exactly.
Well, the best way to do that is just to pick up what's right there in the immediate zone on the stage. So you can get 30 people together. You don't need 30 microphones. You probably technically need like 8 overheads to do it properly. We might have had 4 or maybe 6 in the middle. Spread out over the stage, we might have had 10. So Christmas events, we'd have 2 stages. It's like 2 steps, really, but like really big steps.
Yeah.
So you have first row, second row, and
Oh, yeah.
So you get the feel.
I was there, yeah.
Yeah, the optical illusion.
Exactly.
Or illusion, whatever.
Illusion.
Whichever,
yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
And we're getting close to wrapping up the show. So I'll throw out the phone number once again, 434-394-0924. If you have a question for Noah Layman, you can call that number and get connected to us. But Noah, so what are your do you have some favorite stories or memories about working? What is the most memorable moments of sound?
2.
Okay.
2, I should say, into the microphone. 2. So one was a church event. Well, they're both church events, but one was like a talent night event. So the church invited artists, lay people who don't really have artistry in their bloodline or their blood, or just anybody to showcase what they wanted to do. And one lady painted this awesome picture of a cherry tree blossoming and with the leaves actually like floating away. I think you probably remember.
Yeah.
That was great. And then we had one lady, she came up to sing, and I stuck the CD in because we did CDs. I don't know why. Just a hassle. Anyways, stuck the CD in and played it, and she sang along, and you could not stop cracking up laughing. Because you didn't like how she sounded.
What? I don't remember this. I don't know. Yeah.
As everybody could imagine, a church event with a talent night, you get really good talent. Yeah. Especially out of a pool of
a wide net of different,
you got like 180 people. And a membership of 250. Attendance of typical 150. You get a few artists. You get a few musicians. And this one lady. She's nice, but the voice wasn't the best. Yeah. So that stuck out in my mind, and partly because you kept laughing. And then the second church event was outside, actually. We did an outside thing.
I know exactly. I remember this one, yeah. Is the prayer? All right. Yeah.
And,
that was a good...
We had a 40-foot trailer set up
Yeah.
as a stage. And we set it all up, and we had everybody out there. And then we had this church event. And a lot of people were invited to pray from different churches. I think did we have a Catholic there?
Yeah, I think it was different churches in the area, but
I don't think we had a Catholic there. I think that was a Presbyterian. In any case, you couldn't stop laughing on one occasion. So.
Yeah, so well, I mean, I think
you did
that
the decent
day,
thing. You did the decent thing and walked away.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, like, working in, behind the scenes, you just start developing a weird sixth sense of humor for things. I feel like when situations aren't going good, you can't help but laugh.
It was a beautiful day,
and that day was so hot. You're shaking your head now. The sun was out.
Yeah,
I remember
it was in our eyes. We were glaring.
Yeah, I remember.
The sun was glaring, and we had to cover our eyes.
But I'm glad you brought that up because there was a couple of times, especially during COVID, we had to do things outside due to regulations and restrictions.
I don't know if we really did a whole lot. We did Sundays.
We did a few, and that involved moving the soundboard using one of the graveyard soundboards. No,
we used the main one.
You did,
didn't we?
I thought we used one of the graveyard soundboards.
Oh, you're right, we did.
Yes,
that was we have a big 32 or 42.
Yeah,
and then we had the small 24. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the 24 channel.
And so that basically means a whole new setup. You have to set up each morning and break it down each afternoon. Yep. That was a lot of equipment that we were moving.
It was, but at least people knew that what we were doing was like a struggle.
Yeah.
And so they actually pitched in to carry stuff.
Yeah, but you didn't want everybody to pitch in because you don't want like the guy who doesn't have like really good biceps to hold like a 40-pound soundboard.
Well, we didn't let them take the soundboard.
Yeah,
for obvious reasons, and we didn't let them take necessarily the big speakers
or instruments.
Or the instruments, definitely not the instruments. The artists actually provided most of their own instruments,
which was kind of beautiful in a way.
Well, not just in a way.
Okay.
It actually was.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I mean,
it was.
They didn't have to bring their own instruments,
but they did. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Everybody came in. Very
clutch.
I didn't want to say clutch, but yeah, it's what it is.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So
break a rule.
It's definitely interesting. It's definitely how would you wrap up sound, like being a sound operator in a nice short sweet little saying, like
for the next person or myself?
Just for yourself and the next person. Yeah.
So both.
Both, yeah, please.
It's good if you can handle stress.
Yeah.
It's good if you can handle people.
Yeah.
And by handle, I don't mean like yell at.
Mm-hmm.
You have to work.
You don't want to be. Yeah, you can't be throwing microphones at people.
Yeah, and if somebody does yell at you, you can't really just snap back at them. Mm-hmm. You really do have to kind of just take it. Because it's not technically. It is actually your fault.
Yeah.
If something goes wrong.
Yeah.
And you're the operator.
Also, it takes a huge amount of problem-solving abilities, I feel like.
Under stress.
Yeah.
So, with a time crunch. So, if you can do that, you can always look back and be like, well, I did this, and we survived, and we did it. And it's good. It's good. And then if you're definitely into the sound, like the sound theory, that's something you can go down a huge rabbit hole. Because you get into electrical theory, you get into the sound.
Yeah.
You get into the hypothetical things that you can't hear. Do they actually affect what you can hear? So there's all that.
Yeah. So it's really a never-ending.
Pretty much, if you wanted to spend your life looking into
chasing that dragon that is
you
sound.
become an electrical engineer. You can become a sound engineer. You get into it. Yeah. And you can also build your own stuff. If you really, really got into it, you can build your own cables.
Yeah. Which is pretty cool. Yeah. But. Well, Noah, I think that's going to wrap it up for, the Farmville Spotlight. Thank you again for coming in. We appreciate that. Do you have any closing things that you want to say? Also, I'll open up the phone number one more time if somebody wants to call in real fast and ask Noah something. 434-394-0924. That's the number to call in if you want to ask Noah Layman a question about sound. But Noah, you got anything else you want to add?
Any closing remarks?
Yeah, closing remarks.
What
would you say to a young Noah Layman starting off? with no experience with sound. How would you ready him for what he is about to face?
Pray a little more and talk a little more to people.
Yeah.
I think that would have helped to be able to talk a little more to people.
Yeah. You didn't do that enough?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I took the advice that people gave, but I didn't really give the sense that I was like open to just chatting to. Apparently.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that until after.
You were closed off.
It was perceived as being closed off at least, so that wasn't good.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, we got to close up the show now, Noah. So thanks once again. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Once again, that is another edition of the Farmville Spotlight, brought to you by the North Street Press Club, your place for great food and drinks. Tune in next month. I will have a special artist, Amanda Gaw, I believe, who is a painter, a local painter, and just overall great person. So closing out now. Catch you next time.
WFLO AM in Farmville.
ABC News, I'm Michelle Franzen. At a joint news conference with Britain's Prime Minister at the White